The old me would have forgiven him. She would have baked him cookies next time he visited. Asked how his job search was going. Pretended that his cruel words were just immature jokes. But that woman didn't live here anymore. She'd been replaced by someone quieter. Sharper. Someone who had nothing left to prove, but everything to settle. And I knew exactly where to begin. I started with Chase's finances. Ryan and I had co-signed Chase's private student loans. Why? Because he had poor credit and no one else in the family would help. He swore he'd pay them off once he made it. Spoiler alert, he never did. Ryan had been covering the monthly payments for over a year now. But the loans were in both their names. And there's a clause people tend to forget: if the cosigner decides the borrower is unreliable, they can initiate a reassessment. So I made a few calls. Had Chase's credit history reviewed. And I flagged him for a cosigner release review. His unstable employment, missed payments, and high credit card debt triggered a clause that forced his loan status to be reassessed, and guess what? It froze his deferments. Accelerated his payment plan. Kicked him into default. That shiny new car he drove to Thanksgiving? Repossessed within 3 weeks. That luxury apartment in Charlotte? Lease terminated. Evicted. But I wasn't done. Next, I contacted the company he interned at last summer, the one he bragged about during dinner. I'm basically in line for a full-time offer, he'd said, sipping from my crystal wineglass like a king. Well, he had left a trail of lies there too. I sent them an anonymous packet. Copies of his padded resume. The fact that he'd listed a fake GPA. That he'd lied about a second internship that never happened. All verifiable. I didn't even have to say a word. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. He was blacklisted before the next recruitment cycle even started. The last thing? It was personal. Remember all those favors I did for him over the years? I collected them like puzzle pieces. Chase had once used my laptop to log into a temp job portal. I'd made a full copy of the hard drive back then, just standard backup. I found a folder labeled Future Plans that had screenshots of conversations with recruiters, some questionable search history, and even a list of people to impress. My name wasn't on it. Of course not. But you know whose name was? A girl named Kelsey. His ex. The one who dumped him for lying to her parents about being a finance associate. Guess who I sent a heartfelt, anonymous email to? With attachments. And a gentle subject line: he's still lying. Just thought you should know. By the end of month 2, Chase had no job, no girlfriend, a tanked credit score, and mounting debt with no safety net. And the best part? He still had no idea I was behind any of it. That was about to change. Because the final act? The part where he saw my face while his world cracked open? That was coming. And I was going to enjoy every second of it. It started with a simple invitation. A charity gala Ryan and I sponsored every year for small business owners in Asheville. Nothing too fancy: cocktail attire, live jazz, silent auction. We'd supported this event for years. But this time, I added something extra to the guest list. Chase. I knew he'd show. Pride like his wouldn't let him turn down a public stage, especially if it meant pretending his life was still intact. And right on cue, he arrived. Wearing a borrowed suit, overcompensating with that arrogant smirk. He walked in like he owned the room. But I watched closely: his shoes were scuffed, and his confidence had cracks. I greeted him warmly, kissed him on the cheek. I even introduced him to a few investors as my brilliant nephew who's currently between opportunities. He chuckled awkwardly. Yeah, taking time to evaluate the market, he lied smoothly. I smiled. That's one way to spin being blacklisted from 3 firms in the last 30 days. His face twitched. Barely. But it was there. The first flicker of fear. I leaned in close and whispered, "You really should check who has access to your cloud backups." His eyes widened. I walked away. Next came the humiliation. During the auction, I presented a scholarship initiative for underprivileged youth under my name, fully funded by the money we'd originally saved to help Chase launch his business. I even shared a slideshow of letters from students we were now supporting. One of them read aloud, "Dear Mrs. Cassandra, thank you for believing in people like me. I hope I make you proud." The applause was thunderous. And Chase? He just sat there, frozen, red-faced. No one noticed. But I did. He wasn't the golden boy anymore. He was background noise. I could have stopped there. But there was one more string to pull. The family. At Sunday dinner a few weeks later, yes, I still hosted, I stood up before dessert and announced that we'd made some financial changes. Ryan and I have decided to shift our support to causes that bring actual return, emotional or otherwise. That includes our new scholarship fund, our staff, and our retirement. I turned to Chase. So unfortunately, we'll no longer be covering your student loan payments. Silence. Dead. Heavy. Beautiful silence. Chase opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Just a quiet gasp. His face went pale. Then his mom, Ryan's sister, turned to him and said, "Wait, they were still paying those?" Oof. That was the moment his mask cracked completely. He stood up, muttered something about needing air, and left. He hasn't been back since. And you know what? Not a single person has asked why. He thought I'd forget. That I'd forgive. He thought I was just the aunt who cooked dinners and smiled too much. But Chase learned something the hard way. I may serve dessert with a silver spoon, but I also know how to cut with it. And the best part? I wasn't even finished yet. I'm not someone who craves attention. I like my peace, my home, and keeping family close even when they don't always deserve it. My name's Cassandra, I'm 42, and for the last 18 years, I've been married to the kindest man I've ever met, Ryan. Together, we've built a good life in Asheville, North Carolina. A modest home, a thriving small business, and a marriage that's survived infertility, illness, and even betrayal from those we trusted most. One of those people was Ryan's nephew, Chase. We practically raised that boy. Paid his college tuition. Fed him. Housed him when his mother, Ryan's sister, kicked him out. I treated him like my own. But last Thanksgiving, he stood in front of our entire family and humiliated me. Lied about me. Made me look like a gold digger and a fraud. And Ryan? He was too shocked to speak. But me? I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply smiled, and decided it was time I stopped playing the kind aunt and reminded Chase exactly who he was messing with. Because when a woman like me gives everything, and gets humiliated in return, she doesn't walk away. She burns the whole rotten foundation down. Thanksgiving was always my favorite holiday. No pressure, just food, warmth, and a house full of family. That year, we hosted it at our place, like always. I'd spent 2 days prepping everything from cranberry stuffing to my famous sweet potato casserole. Everyone was there, Ryan's siblings, their spouses, our nieces and nephews. Including Chase, our golden boy. He walked in like he owned the place. Designer coat, expensive boots, phone in hand, barely looked up when I hugged him. Still, I smiled. Because love, it doesn't keep score. At least, I didn't. Not until he stood up for a toast after dinner. He clinked his glass and said, "I want to thank Uncle Ryan for paying my way through college." But I guess we all know why he could afford it. He paused, looking straight at me. Because he married well. Or rather, married up. People laughed. Nervously. I stared at him, frozen. He kept going. Let's be real, Aunt Cass always knew how to land a paycheck. Isn't that right? Dead silence. Ryan choked on his wine. I looked around the room, faces confused, some grinning like it was a joke, others staring at me with that same old suspicion. I've been through this before. Whispers behind my back that I trapped Ryan because he was the nice guy with a stable future, while I was the older woman with baggage. But Chase, he took it public. He humiliated me after everything we did for him. We co-signed his student loans. We paid his rent when he got fired. I drove him to his internship interviews when he didn't have a car. And now? Now, I was just a joke. I stood up slowly, nodded, and excused myself from the table. I didn't say a word to Chase. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. Ryan tried to follow me, but I locked the bathroom door and just stared at myself in the mirror. My hands were shaking. But not from sadness. From something sharper. Something colder. I realized in that moment, I wasn't hurt. I was done. Done trying to be accepted. Done forgiving ungrateful, spoiled little boys who confuse kindness with weakness. That night, I didn't sleep. I planned. Because if Chase thought he could shame me in front of my own family and walk away without consequences, he clearly didn't know who the hell he was dealing with. The next morning, the kitchen still smelled like roasted turkey and pie crust, but to me, it reeked of betrayal. I walked past the pile of dishes, the stained napkins, the half-empty wine bottles, and all I could think was, he sat here. He laughed here. Ryan tried to talk to me. I could see the guilt in his eyes. He hadn't said a word when Chase humiliated me. Not one. And that silence cut deeper than anything else. I didn't expect it, he said. He blindsided me. I froze. I didn't yell. I just nodded. Because the truth is, I had frozen too. But now? I was thawing. And what was left inside me wasn't soft anymore. For a few days, I kept to myself. I wasn't sad, not really. It was something else, something harder to name. A kind of grief mixed with fire. A quiet unraveling of the woman I used to be. I thought back to all the times I'd made excuses for Chase. When he stole from his college roommate? He's just figuring things out. When he crashed our car and blamed someone else? He panicked. He's still young. Even when he flunked out of his first semester and lied to our faces about it, we just paid more, encouraged him harder, believed in him more than he ever earned. And me? I was the fool who kept mothering a boy who would never see me as family. Something in me snapped. I started writing things down. Every dollar we spent on him. Every favor we pulled. Every time I bent over backward to clean up his mess. I pulled out the receipts, the emails, the bank transfers. You see, Chase thought he was slick. But I had a memory like a vault. And I kept records like a banker. I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet, but I knew this, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about setting a boundary. A message. That just because a woman is kind, doesn't mean she's weak. That just because I let you in, doesn't mean I won't lock the door and throw away the key when you cross the line. And Chase had crossed that line. With a smile on his face. That smile was going to be the last thing he'd remember before I took everything he thought he had, and made it vanish. The final nail came on a Tuesday. I had forwarded his loan default letter, the one with the total balance due, to every adult in our extended family, along with a short message. To those who believed I was just a gold digger, kindly note the investments I made into this family. In full, with interest. This is what silence looks like when it speaks back. By evening, my phone was flooded. Some called to apologize. Some didn't know what to say. But Chase? He called Ryan, crying, angry, begging him to control me. To stop that character assassination. Ryan listened quietly and said just one thing. Cass doesn't need my permission. She never did. That broke whatever little pride Chase had left. He blocked us both the next day. And me? I went to bed with the deepest breath I'd taken in years. Because this wasn't just revenge. It was clarity. I'd spent years proving I was worthy of love, of respect, of a seat at the table. But the truth was, I'd built the table. And from now on, I'd be the one deciding who got to sit at it. And Chase? He'd never even make it past the door again. It's been 6 months. Chase moved back in with his mother. Rumor is, he's working part-time at a car rental place. He's quiet on social media now, no flashy vacations, no humble brag posts about grind culture. But I don't check anymore. I don't need to. This wasn't about ruining his life. It was about reclaiming mine. For years, I played the polite role. Smiled when dismissed. Nodded when talked over. Carried everyone's burdens like they were my own, and still got labeled an outsider in my own home. But not anymore. Now, I host dinners with people who see me. Now, I fund dreams for kids who deserve a chance, not spoiled adults who burn bridges and blame the smoke. And Ryan? He finally understands. That being nice doesn't mean being a doormat. That my strength doesn't need defending, it just needs space to roar. Sometimes, revenge isn't about screaming. It's about the quiet things. About pulling your love away from the wrong people and pouring it into something real. About rising, not to destroy, but to reclaim. And now? Now I sit at my own table. Head held high. Peace in my chest. And Chase? Chase is just a lesson I had to teach. One I'll never need to repeat.